Hello, good morning, and welcome to this webinar on environmental crime. We are excited to partner with the Gibraltar Compliance Association. We'd like to thank Carlos Martins for facilitating this webinar. Eastnets, we are a global provider of financial crime and compliance solutions. We're a category leader for sanction screening, AML, and transactions monitoring solutions. Over 800 banks worldwide use our solutions, including more than 100 in the European region. My colleague Hassan Zebdeh will be presenting today's session. Hassan is an expert in financial crime. He has more than 15 years of experience working for various banks and the United Nations, and he is currently our head of regulations at Eastnets. I will now let Hassan begin. If you have any questions, feel free to use the questions tab on the site control panel, and we will address them after Hassan's presentation. Over to you, Hassan.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar. As mentioned by my colleague Thomas, I will be talking about the environmental crime. Now we know it's a trending issue in the financial crime industry. I'm trying to move the slides. Yeah. The agenda will be talking about the definition and impact of the environmental crime, the characteristics, convergence with other crime areas, numbers and insights, standards and regulations on environmental crime, risk indicators and detection, disrupting money laundering from environmental crime, and also sorry, that one was challenges, and the last one will be how to disrupt money laundering from environmental crime. We will have a Q&A after finishing the slides. Okay. What is environmental crime? Environmental crime is the activities which are abusing the natural resources and also breaching the environmental legislation, which will cause significant threat to the environment, human and other creatures like animals, wild animals, and also plants. Environmental crime types, we have actually main 4 types. The first one is the forestry crime, illegal logging, and this is actually a very important topic, and it is a direct cause of the global warming. We know that forestry crimes are very active in some jurisdictions. Illegal wildlife trade, this is also, we know that there are too many animals and plants which are listed as an endangered species. I will give you one example about the wildlife trade. It can be the tusks, the elephant tusks. It can also be, live animals. It can be part of the animals. So this is considered as an illegal wildlife trade. Illegal mining. Mining is legal, but sometimes if it is done without the permission of the government, it will be considered as an illegal, and it will have a very adverse impact on the environment. Waste trafficking, it is we have those factories, we have industries which are resulting in a tremendous amount of waste, and this waste can be transferred from one region to another, and this is it can be dumped actually in let's say civilian areas or in natural areas. So it can pollute, and it will impact all the species living in these specific areas. Environmental crime impact. it will increase the level of pollution, such as toxic chemicals, carbon monoxide, dioxide, in a very threatening levels. A degradation of wildlife, as I mentioned, there are too many species which are listed as endangered species. So hunting them to use their parts or trading them alive, it can also degrade the wildlife. A reduction in biodiversity, the disturbance of ecological balance. We know that environment is based on ecological balance. Whenever this ecological balance is impacted, the whole chain will be impacted. Irreversible climate change, natural disaster which is resulted from the climate change, the contamination of the food chain with all these, pollutions, toxic materials, illegal, let's say, hunting. It will all impact the food chain. It will cause contamination. For example, if we are dumping the waste in the rivers, for example, it will pollute the whole river with all the species in the river. Death and reduced life expectancy. And this is actually, if we look at all these impacts, we will know why it will cause the death and the reduced life for all species, including the human being. Environmental crime characteristics. It is actually a low risk crime, because we know that most of the, for example, let's talk about financial institutions. We know that financial institutions, they are not really experts in the field of environment. They are not really aware of the red flags, the typologies. So it is a very low risk crime. It is not easy to be detected, even for the law enforcement. It needs, a specific knowledge to be able to recognize those red flags. And also it generates a tremendous amount of money. It's a high reward crime. So it is attractive. Use of front companies to commingle illegal and legal proceeds. It is very similar to the drug trafficking, where usually the criminals, they do this mixing of proceeds. So they will kill the trace of the dirty money they are generating. Use of shell companies to hide beneficial owners, because usually those criminals who are involved in environmental crime, they are organized crime members, and usually they are listed. And also there is a huge involvement of politically exposed people in this kind of crimes. So they will be using shell companies to hide their the beneficial owners. Offshore corporate structures to conceal the ultimate criminals. It is for the same reason. They will be using those offshore corporate structures, because we know that the level of transparency in the ownership of those and controlling those corporates are not an easy thing to be determined. Reliance on trade-based financial crime, because this environmental crime will be about, usually about goods which are related to mining, illegal mining, illegal forestry, wildlife trade. So there are goods involved, and these goods usually are shipped from one country to another. So there is a very huge involvement of trade-based financial crime. It fuels the corruption, because sometimes to be able to do those crimes and to commit those crimes, you need to have the approval of some officials, and briberies usually are involved. It converges with other organized crimes such as tax fraud, drug trafficking, and forced labor. I will be talking about them in the next slide. They are extremely attractive to organized crime groups. And a lot of investigation cases have been conducted, and it was found that the common thing is the organized crime groups involved in those crimes. As you can see, actually, this diagram was in the FATF report on money laundering from environmental crime. We can see that in the middle, we have the waste trafficking, illegal logging, illegal mining, for example, is also connected to other environmental crime, which is illegal wildlife trade. It's also connected to tax crimes because those criminals, they don't, of course, pay the proceeds of those taxes, and especially if they are doing the illegal logging and mining, they will not be paying any taxes, and the government will lose any potential taxes that can be gathered. The corruption, it usually involves those officials who are involved, and this will involve, of course, briberies and also falsification of origin certificates to be able to ship those items from one country to another. It's also connected to human trafficking and smuggling because those people who are victims usually are forced to work in the illegal mines, for example. It is also connected to terrorism and armed insurgency. Those crimes, such as the environmental crime, they will generate a huge amount of money, and this will help those criminal groups to operate in this area, so they can generate and they can fuel actually their activities in terrorism or insurgency and so on. And of course, it will involve the smuggling of guns and drugs. Talking about numbers, FATF has estimated the proceeds from the environmental crime in total between 110 to 281 billion US dollars per year. So we can see that this is a very huge number actually, and it will indicate how much this business is lucrative. And we can also notice that the range is a bit huge between the 110 and 281. And here we can tell that it is not easy to detect these crimes. That's why we have this estimation. The breakdown of this amount is forestry crime between 51 to 152 billion US dollar per year. For illegal mining, it is 12 to 48 billion. Waste trafficking, 10 to 12 billion. Illegal wildlife trade between 7 and 23. And if we, the total number of the maximum, let's say, estimation does not really correspond to the general estimation, the total estimation. I tried to figure out the reason, but obviously this is because there are some other aspects involved in that, such as the tax evasion related issues. UN has stated that the annual growth rate is between 5 to 7%, making it likely the 4th largest criminal area in the world. So this will indicate the importance of the monitoring and detecting those crimes, whether by the financial institutions or other, let's say, bodies such as the governmental and international bodies. And cooperation is crucial here. I will be talking about it. This was taken from the Basel AML Index 2022. We can see that there is a correlation between the environmental crime and the high, the money laundering and terrorist financing activities in any specific country. They are correlated. The more high risk the country for money laundering and terrorist financing, the more it is high risk for environmental crimes. And as we can see here, we have the general score of each country for AML, for money laundering, sorry. We can see that the one in orange is the environmental crime. It is really correlated to that. Financial crime international standards on environmental crime. We have a very good beneficial reports published by FATF. The first one is the money laundering from environmental crime, which was issued in July 2021. And the other one is report on money laundering and the illegal wildlife trade in June 2020. These documents are very beneficial for governments, for financial institutions, for even Reg-tech sector. It involves or it includes cases, real life cases, red flags, risk indicators, describing the challenges of detecting and monitoring those activities, and explaining the types of those activities. And we have also a very good statistics regarding those crimes. I really encourage everyone to have a look at these documents. We have some initiatives by national governments in regard to environmental crime. For example, in November 2021, FinCEN has issued a notice to call attention to environmental crimes and related financial activity. This document includes STR requirements for this specific crimes, and also risk indicators, and involves also record keeping requirements for the monitoring. Also in May 2020, Gibraltar, FIU, signed a memorandum of understanding with the Department of the Environment to strengthen the international efforts against illegal wildlife trade. Consequently, Gibraltar included illegal wildlife trade in their latest national risk assessment published in August 2020. So we can see here that governments, they started to respond to these kind of risks, which are increasing. It is not only increasing, even the awareness of those crimes is also increasing by the governments, by the general public, and also the international organizations and NGOs. There is a very huge focus on that, and now Financial Action Task Force, they are including the environmental crime controls in their mutual evaluation that they are taking for the member countries. Okay, environmental crime risk indicators. These documents, they include, in total, they include 70 potential risk indicators on environmental crime, including illegal wildlife trafficking. We have potential risk indicators in both documents. These risk indicators can be translated into rules and scenarios, red flags that can help in detecting those crimes, and will trigger further investigation over those transactions which are related, and the financial flows which are related to those crimes. These risk indicators are to be used in detecting environmental crime by the financial sector. It is mainly covering those financial flows. So if you are a financial sector, it's extremely important to review those indicators and to check if your national regulator is translating those indicators or transposing them into the national regulation. So you need to comply with them. For example, I will give an example. As an international company providing financial crime solutions, we analyzed all these risk indicators and reflecting them into our monitoring tools. And now for the risk indicators, they are mainly falling under the below categories. The KYC, information and verification. It is extremely important to have a sufficient customer information, verifying them, knowing the type of economic activity this customer is involved in, and this will trigger, for example, the enhanced due diligence and close monitoring of those customers. And this KYC has to be perpetual. It has to be all the time up to date, and it has to be sufficient, especially for those customers who are operating and involved in transactions, cross-border transactions, and those cross-border transactions are usually between source and destination countries for environmental crime. AML, CTF, and fraud monitoring, including trade-based financial crime. It's very important to deploy those risk indicators, translating them into rules, scenarios, whether they are a library rules or they are artificial intelligence rules, to be able to detect those transactions, especially for the trade-based financial crime the trade finance transactions, because as I mentioned, those goods are usually traded among different countries. So monitoring those transactions is extremely important. Fraud is a good example because we know that there is usually a falsification in certificate of origin in particular, and also we can find that they will be manipulating the description of goods and services. So you need to have this this open eye on those transactions. Screening the involved parties, and not only the parties, not only the applicant and the beneficiary, for example, also the ultimate beneficial owners who are hiding behind those corporate structures to be able to trade those items which are resulted from the environmental crimes. For example, the PEPs, the high-risk environmental crime countries, the sanctioned entities. As I mentioned, those organized crime groups, members, usually they are sanctioned or they are listed. So it is very important to pay attention to that. Also for the PEPs, they are involved, in briberies to facilitate those type of environmental crimes. Okay, challenges in disrupting money laundering from environmental crime. I know it is not an easy job to do that. This report that has been published by FATF, it was a subsequent report to a survey that has been taken and it has been distributed among financial institutions and other governmental bodies. And most of the financial institutions and even the other bodies, they declare that they have challenges to understand and to detect those transactions. The reasons why is that there is a lack of sufficient and accurate information. The way the illicit financial flows from the environmental crimes the way they are generated and the way they are transacted is not really clear. Now, a lot of investigations are taking place. A lot of cases are under investigation, and by time, I think we will have more clear picture for these kind of environmental crime financial flows. The lack of information on typologies and risk factors for environmental crimes, and as I mentioned, these are potential risk factors. It is not easy to understand the way they are operating, and even if you, for example, if you are a compliance officer working for a financial institution and you are doing your own research, you will find a very limited information about these risk factors and typologies. You will find a tremendous amount of information about the environmental crime in general. Yes, this is true, but for the risk factors, risk indicators, typologies, this is extremely rare. Most FIUs and relevant authorities have not developed environmental crime fighting framework. As I mentioned, this is a trending topic. It was not subject for governmental attention before, especially from financial crime perspective, and now it is actually more into attention. International bodies, governments are focusing on the financial crimes which are resulted from environmental crimes. FIs and non-profit organizations highlighted that environmental crimes are difficult to identify because of the previous mentioned, above mentioned reasons. Disrupting money laundering from environmental crime for public sector. First, implementing FATF standards regarding environmental crime, such as the transparent BO requirements. We know that there is a huge debate regarding exposing the beneficial owner requirements, such as the public registries, who has the right to access those registries, etc. But it is very important to have those BO requirements and registries available, at least for the financial institution and other relevant bodies who are fighting those environmental crimes. And also they need to be updated, they need to be sufficient, and they need to be a risk-based approach. The more the profile is a high-risk profile from economic perspective, or that can be related to those type of activities, illegal activities, the update has to be more frequent. It needs to be perpetual, such as, you know, or similar to the KYC that are maintained by the financial institutions. Public-private sector to share risk information. This is very important as well. And we can see that there are some initiatives not only related to environmental crime, but other related crimes, and also some related industries, such as the trade finance, for example. We can see that there are initiatives to create platforms to upload all the relevant transactions, messages, documents related to trade finance. Also digitizing the certificate of origin, digitization of the bill of lading. These are very beneficial to detect such illegal activities. This will also help in to strengthen the due diligence and also the monitoring of the financial flows of these transactions. Also, this cooperation between the public and private sector will aim to ensure that there is a sufficient level of understanding of money laundering risk that are related to environmental crimes. Also, the collaboration between the environmental agencies and the relevant authorities, such as FIUs, the financial intelligence units, and other law enforcement authorities, because environmental agencies are the most let's say, educated people about the environmental crimes. They know exactly what are environmental crimes. They know more about the typologies of those environmental crimes. They know a lot of details about it. So sharing those information with the relevant authorities, it will help in monitoring and detecting those crimes. International cooperation for the exchange of information and evidence. This is what we call it, the mutual legal assistance treaties, where they can not only share information, like in the case of the FIUs, but also they can exchange evidence. And this is extremely important because the international nature of this kind of environmental crime, usually the items which are traded cross-border. So we know the importance of that. AML authorities to have the power to investigate and trace assets from environmental crime. It is not only to have the power itself, it needs to be a sufficient power and also the capacity. They need to do augmentation in their resources to be able to investigate and trace those assets. Responding to environmental crime should be integrated into wider AML and environmental crime strategies. Any strategy to fight the crimes, forming legislations, it needs to be considered as an important area that can be covered by those strategies. Countries must consider environmental crime, money laundering risk assessment while undertaking the national risk assessment. And this is also important to help the financial institutions to focus their efforts on fighting those risk indicators and the risk of those financial flows which are resulted from the environmental crimes. Disrupting money laundering from environmental crime, and this is for private sector. For private sector, actually, to start with is the customer due diligence for preventive action and STR for detecting environmental crime. We know that financial institution is a very important defense line. They will usually these crimes, the environmental crimes are committed for the sake of generating funds. So these funds usually will be integrated into the financial system. So the one of the first lines of defense is the financial institutions. So having a proper customer due diligence program will help to prevent these environmental crimes, and also whenever you have any doubts or you have any suspicious or unusual activities that can indicate to an environmental crime, it has to be reported by STR or SAR to the related authorities or the relevant authorities or dedicated authorities. Close monitoring of those customers operating between source and demand countries for this kind of trade. Whenever we are doing the customer due diligence, having the KYC information, of course, we will be able to understand the economic behavior and the economic activity of our customers. So whenever we can see that we have a customer who's doing, for example, a trade finance deals, we need to get more detailed information about the countries, about the goods traded. And whenever we find that this particular customer is usually trading between the source and demand countries of those environmental crimes, we need to consider this a high risk and to have a close monitoring of these transactions. The source and demand countries to be identified, you can find it in the FATF report, and there are too many other sources that you can know exactly what countries they are considered as a source countries and demand countries. Supporting documentation. It is extremely important to obtain the supporting documentation from the customers whenever they are doing these kind of trades, to understand what kind of items they are, to check if these items are prohibited or they are controlled. For example, we have this organization sites. They give permits to trade specific species. CITES is the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora. So this can be a very good documentation that can be obtained, and also a customer attestation. The use of risk indicators highlighted by FATF in environmental crime monitoring. These risk indicators will help you in detecting those suspicious and unusual activities and transactions that can be investigated and eventually can be reported to the FIU or to any dedicated authority that you have in your own country. Implementing proper tools that can be integrated to detect those environmental crime, money laundering risk indicators, because we know that with the huge amount of transactions that you have, it's very important to automate the whole process of monitoring and detecting those transactions and activities. It is not only by automating them. Also now, this is not enough. Even you need to go further by utilizing the new technologies such as artificial intelligence, machine learning, NLPs, and etc. So you need to have those tools. Those tools usually are about monitoring the AML, the CTF fraud transactions, including trade-based money laundering. Trade-based money laundering, for example, we know that it is a sophisticated type of transaction. We have multiple components in the transaction. For example, we may have the LC messages, the letter of credit messages. We will have multiple documentation such as certificate of origin, bill of lading, and also we may have the packing list, commercial invoice. All these documentations need to be reviewed. Also the vessels, for example, the vessel name can be mentioned in the bill of lading. You need to monitor the vessel. So all these type of monitoring is very sophisticated, and it is not easy to be detected without the use of advanced technologies and solutions. Also, to have a KYC data which is accurate, sufficient, verified, and up to date. This is a very important part. If you don't have this KYC information, all the monitoring that you are doing will not help in detecting environmental crimes and other crimes. It's not only environmental crimes. All predicate offenses, all crimes that are related to money laundering will require a sufficient KYC information. Also, for the watch list screening, whether it is done for your customer base on periodic basis, or whenever you have a list update, when you have a transaction which is, for example, a wire transfer or a trade finance transactions, you need to do the proper watch list screening to do to detect any sanctioned or listed entities which are involved, which is involved in the transaction, and also if there is a PIP, which is a politically exposed person involved in the transactions, so you pay more attention and apply the enhanced due diligence rules to be able to detect any potential suspicious behavior and activity. That's all for today. Thank you very much for joining us again, and please feel free to ask any question and I'll be answering them. Thank you very much. Over to you, Thomas.
Thank you very much for the presentation, Hassan. We did receive a few questions through the question box, so maybe you'd like to address those.
Yes.
So the first question is, as a financial institution, what type of transaction should we focus on monitoring activities on to detect environmental crime?
Yes. Okay, thank you. Now, in my opinion, all type of transactions that you have, you need to give a special attention and monitor them closely whenever they are having any, let's say, risk indicator or anything related to unusual behavior or activity, especially for the wire transfers, for example. For the trade finance transactions. As I mentioned, usually these are cross-border activities. So they will be settled using the wire transfers, and also it will involve goods, as I mentioned before. And usually these goods are shipped from one country to another through the trade finance transactions.
Okay, thank you. We have another question here.
Yeah.
Do financial flows which are related to these environmental crimes reside between the involved countries, in parentheses, source and destination?
Okay. Not necessarily, because in some cases it was found that there are multiple geographic locations and jurisdictions involved in that. For example, you have the source country shipping those illegal items from the source country to the destination country, but the payments, the sender and the receiver are located in two different jurisdictions. So in total, we have, for example, like 4 jurisdictions. So it is not necessarily be residing between only the source and the destination country. It can be multiple jurisdictions, and as I mentioned, it can be involving offshore and tax haven regimes.
Okay, thank you. And then finally, we have a last question. Do you help your customers by providing these anti-financial crime tools to detect and report these environmental crime activities?
Yes, definitely. As we are a global, one of the most recognized global Reg-tech solution provider, we provide anti-financial crime solutions, AML, regarding AML, CTF, sanction screening, fraud, trade-based money laundering solution, trade-based financial crime solution. Yes, of course, we help our customers in that. Our solutions are dynamic. They can be integrated to provide a full suite to monitor those financial crimes resulted from any illegal environmental activities. For example, we have a trade-based financial crime solution that can digest and digitize the documentation such as the bill of lading, the commercial invoice, the certificate of origin, and linking it to the message, monitoring the vessel, etc. Yes, so we help in that. And actually, whenever we have any new standards or regulations, major regulations issued and published, we will review them, analyze them, and reflecting them into our products. And of course, at the time, we are not only providing the technology itself, we also provide, whenever we have any implementation at the customer side, we will also help the customer to even focus the monitoring efforts on the most risky areas. That's it. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much for addressing these questions, Hassan. if the presentation is over now, I would just like to say a quick word of thanks to you, of course, for presenting all of this content. A special thanks to the Gibraltar Compliance Association for hosting this webinar, and a special thanks to Carlos Martins for facilitating the session today. If any of the participants have any further questions, we'll be happy to leave contact details so that they can reach us at a later date. And for now, I just want to say thank you again to everyone for participating. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for the content, Hassan, and I wish you a very good day.
Thank you. Thank you very much.